All right, and we're recording. Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Schutte with Holo and Holochain, and this is another Facebook Live Q&A. This is Q&A number 11, Unlocking the Curiosity Door. Greg, I don't know where you come up with these things, but great. I'm assuming that's Greg. It might be somebody else. All right, a few things. We'll make some announcements while we're waiting for people to jump onto the call. This is our weekly Q&A. Sometimes we'll do it a little more often, but feel free to ask questions. You can ask in the comments on YouTube. You can ask in the comments on Facebook. For those of you who aren't familiar with Holochain, please become more familiar. You can start by visiting our websites at holochain.org or holo.host. You can join our online community that has over 1,000 members at this point. It's free. It's available at chat.holochain.org. Again, that's chat.holochain, HOLOCHAIN.org. We just wrapped up a crowdfunding campaign this week. We raised over $500,000, which was 250% plus of our goal. We were trying to raise $200,000 through a hardware sale primarily, as well as some developer trainings. And that wrapped up this week, but we've just transitioned that from a crowdfunding to an on-demand or in-demand campaign, which basically means if you are interested in supporting the work that we are up to with Holochain and Holo, you can still go and participate through Indiegogo. So look for Holo, H-O-L-O, on Indiegogo, and you'll find us there. I'm sure we'll have some links in the chat as well. We have an initial community offering coming up soon. That's basically our pre-sale of our cryptocurrency for Holo Fuel. We don't unfortunately know exactly which date that's going to launch. We're waiting on regulator approvals before we launch. We were hoping to launch in January. We thought we were going to be launching in January, but some things have changed on the government's end of things. And so they're waiting to give us the final thumbs up before we can go ahead and launch our crowdfunding campaign. When we do get that thumbs up, we will give everybody a couple of days notice. So we'll have 48 hours notice before we actually go live. That said, you can begin the whitelisting process now if you have not already done so. So for folks that are not in the United States, China, or South Korea, go to holo.host/ICO, and you'll be able to go through the whitelisting process, which is basically just you pre-registering to participate in the campaign and demonstrating that you are a citizen of a country that is allowed to participate. And then letting us know what the wallet or funding mechanism is that you're going to be making use of. All right, other announcements. Let's see. Holo Chats. We're doing a whole new round of Holo Chats. Holo Chats are basically a distributed conversation thing. I don't exactly know how to describe it. Where we're inviting other people to have conversations on a particular topic and post them online, and then we will pull them all together and make them visible to the world. And so each week we do a different topic. This week we're going to be talking about applications, specifically distributed applications, and the differences between distributed and decentralized and centralized applications. There's going to be a blog post showing up shortly. If it's not already up, you can find that on our Medium page, medium.com, and you can look for Holo. The actual spelling of our account is H-O-L-O. So kind of funny, but look for us there, and that'll give you the details on how to tag your video or article or interview, and so that we will be able to pull it in and make it visible to the rest of the world. Also, meetups. We have been hosting meetups around the globe. We've been doing them in San Francisco for a couple of months. We've been hosting meetups in Atlanta for a couple of months now. And we've got some happening in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, I think, maybe Sao Paulo. So there's a handful. You can learn more about meetups on our website as well as in our chat. Again, chat.holochain.net. If you are interested in organizing a meetup, you don't have to be an expert on this stuff. You just have to be willing to go, hey, I can organize a space and post something on meetup.com or Facebook or Eventbrite or some other way and gather people. You don't have to be highly technical. You can have it be a technical meetup. You can have it be about the impacts of all of this stuff. Let's see. But you can learn more about organizing by going to the chat channel and reaching out to the Holochain outreach channel in our online community. We've got a developer combo giveaway happening. Go to https://holo.host/dev-survey to figure out how to participate in that. That's basically we're trying to get more developers involved in the campaign. We're wanting them building applications, and so we're reaching out significantly. There are some upcoming hackathons. I think we've got an incorrect date here, but we have a hackathon happening in Copenhagen, I believe at the end of March. It was scheduled for February, but I believe that's been moved back. I can't remember the exact dates, but that might be the 23rd to the 25th. But we'll have that updated shortly. There's also a Sao Paulo hackathon that's going to be happening at the end of March. We just wrapped up a 1 week long hackathon in London focused on federated wikis. And it's an interesting one, although 7 days. Please, if you're organizing a hackathon, don't do a 7-day hackathon. That's brutal for everyone. It's brutal for the organizers. It's brutal for the participants. Keep it to 3 days or something. Don't turn it into a marathon, because these things are meant to be sprints. And this next meetup in the Bay Area is going to be on Tuesday the 13th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Impact Hub, Oakland. All right, that's probably enough on the announcement side. I'm sure we'll say a few more things later on. Let's see. I'm seeing, one more thing, one more announcement. On February 9th, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. East Coast time, 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. GMT, we're going to be doing an online event on Facebook. That's a conversation. It's an interview between Gene Russell, Michael Gusnick, I think is how you pronounce his name. I might be getting that wrong. And Mark Finneran. So that's going to be a Holo chat about Michael Gusick. That's it. It's going to be about Holochain and applications. So it's kind of kicking off this week's Holo chat theme. Michael's going to be talking about Holochain's distributed architecture, where you own your data, which massively improves security and trust in the network. For example, it can be used to create new networks of trust in payment systems for both individuals and for businesses. And this safe network of trust is the very foundation for personal AI, which will be a bit of a future outlook that we'll get into if time permits. So the part of that conversation that's interesting for me that we haven't really dove into too much in these Facebook Q&As has to do with what artificial intelligence might look like in a Holochain world. And from my perspective, the personal AI stuff is really interesting. The overlord AI stuff looks really frightening. So, all right. Wow, there's a bunch of things, more announcements. I thought I was done. In a podcast with Governing the Future, Art Brock talks about the dual fallacies of blockchain, the existence of universal time, and the existence of data as something separate from its author or audience. I'm interested in this powerful switch from a data-centric model of blockchain and also centralized systems to an agent-centric model. Can you elaborate? Specifically, what does it mean that data doesn't exist? Okay. What we're getting at with our agent-centric framework is that there is no such thing as absolute data. There's no such thing as data that doesn't get detected in some way. The basic gist is information always occurs in a form, in formation. We experience that information when we get transformed, when we actually change shape in some way, when we have a state change. Now, that could be we as a human, that could be a cell phone, that could be a thermometer, but we experience information only when we experience transformation. What that means is the witnessing of some state is always from a perspective. And there is I don't know how to frame this, but a making a claim about what was seen. So for instance, a thermometer says that it's 68 degrees outside. Well, what's happening is it's transforming flow of bumping atoms, basically, into maybe the height of a mercury, a little column of mercury. Now, that might not be perfectly calibrated. It could be that this particular thermometer is next to a heater vent, right? So there's all sorts of things about this speaker, whether it's a human or a thermometer or something else, witnessing the world and transforming one signal into another, essentially making a claim about the world. That's how all information gets recorded or witnessed. There is no God's eye view of the system. It's always viewed from a perspective or from particular perspectives. With Holochain, we try to make it visible that that's what's actually happening, that there are perspectives that are that the world is being seen and recorded from. We actually want to hold on to those different perspectives and enable people to combine them in various ways, ways that they find useful. Now, we don't assume that everything people try is going to be useful, but we do assume that through trial and error, they will be able to figure out things that work better and things that work worse. And if they make use of some or rely on some signal or interpret some signal in a way that leads them astray, they'll experience pain or discomfort and they'll go, nope, not doing that again. And they'll learn. And that's a part of the learning process. So I'll leave that. It's easy for me to go deep in the weeds on the agent-centric nature of all this stuff. But I'll kind of leave that there for now. For a developer who's intrigued by Holochain and ready to start tinkering, where do I begin? Are there tutorials I can watch? Guidance? There's a few places to begin. One is go to our GitHub repo and look at the code and start walking through. That is available at github.com/metacurrency/holochain. If you just Google GitHub Holochain, you should be able to find it. Second, we have developer documentation at developer.holochain.org. And then third, jump into the online community at chat.holochain.net or chat.holochain.org. That online community is a great place to get tips from other people and to brainstorm with other people about what kinds of things to build. The one big caveat I'll give right up front is when you're building applications with Holochain, they are actually distributed applications. And so you have to think about them differently than you would think about a centralized application. You have to actually think about the perspectives from which each of the parties is reviewing the information in the system. That's a really useful thing, but it's a new pattern and it takes a little bit of getting used to. For folks who are excited or interested in this, again, go to the online community, ask questions there. We have a lot of really interesting and knowledgeable folks that are trying to build things themselves, and they would love to help you figure out how to build things yourself. All right, next question. Holochain claims that consensus is not required or desired for most use cases. What are use cases where you would want global consensus? Do such use cases exist? The blockchain's architecture, which creates what they call global consensus, but what we call randomly picking one perspective to be the true perspective for everybody in the network. That architecture is useful if you're wanting to make sense of the world at a network layer. You're literally wanting to delegate all of your sense making to the network as a whole. If you have no relationship whatsoever with anyone in that system, and you want to hold on to no information about past behavior. You want everyone to be anonymous. So we've got anonymous strangers interacting, and we don't want any correlations or memory, basically. Then consensus can be a useful tool. In fact, it may be something that you're forced into adopting, because you have to actually pit people against one another in order to keep them honest, because you've actually handcuffed yourself by taking all of the regular mechanisms of social accountability off the table. By removing memory altogether, there you go. It happens to be the case that token-based systems have been, in the blockchain systems, architected in that way. We think that there are better ways of doing cryptocurrencies than token-based systems, but token-based systems make use of this sort of consensus model. It also is part of why those token-based systems tend to have such a hard time scaling. The cost tends to be so high. The electricity use and energy consumption tends to be so high, and they tend to be so slow. So there's a lot of drawbacks. But if you are wanting your sense making to all be sort of handled at the network layer, rather than having individuals be able to make sense of the world by pulling in the information that's relevant to them, there you go. We think there are significant disadvantages in all the ways that I just mentioned, but also in terms of adaptability. All right. Serge asks, I think I understood all but the mutual credit cryptocurrency. I mean, I still don't see how you prevent cheaters, but I'm sure it's me. All right, Serge. Here's the basic gist. In a mutual credit currency, what's happening is two actors are both speaking that they intend to engage in a transfer of value. So if it's you and I have an account, you have an account. What I say is, I'm going to go from 1,000 credits to 995 credits. And your account is going to go from 500 credits to 505 credits. We both sign this, right? So I cryptographically sign this in a way that nobody else would be able to forge. You cryptographically sign this in a way that nobody else would be able to forge. We log that locally. In Holo, we actually share that with some notaries, and then each of us, as well as each of those notaries, share that to their statements to the distributed hash table. The notaries each also validate. So I'm signing, you're signing, a notary that you pick is signing, a notary that I pick is signing, and then we share it to the network as a whole. We may also make use of some tiny bit of mechanisms that essentially account to locking a chain temporarily, until we get a certain penetration of within the distributed hash table. So until we have a certain portion of the people who are supposed to validate this thing saying, yep, I've validated it, I'm not able to actually do another transaction. You're not able to do another transaction. So that's a mechanism for preventing sort of an analog to the traditional double spend attack that people in the blockchain world are familiar with. That said, even though our chains are temporarily locked, no one else's is. Because we're not trying to do global consensus, no one else has to wait for us to finish our resolution. So all of the other parties in the system, and it could be millions or even billions of other parties doing transactions, are actually able to also engage in transactions at the same time we are. They're able to do it in parallel. So this enables the network to handle massive scale, unlike a blockchain architecture where we're having to wait for everybody to kind of to pick what the ordering of all of these transactions are. Serge had a follow-up post. So there's only the notary's way of being really sure it's okay, right? No. Even if we didn't have notaries, if I then stated that I didn't send you this money, I said, no, I didn't do that. There's evidence that is visible to everyone in the community that I had agreed to send you those funds, right? The notaries and other tools that we're making use of are to try to improve the security against particular attacks. But recognize that a mutual credit architecture is a general architecture. And you can think of these things as almost lightweight building blocks, whether it's Holochain in general or the mutual credit system in particular. You can think of those as lightweight building blocks, and you can layer additional things on top of those. So for instance, if you and I wanted to do a deal and it was a multi-million-dollar deal, we might go through a bunch of extra hoops. We might get lawyers involved and draft up a legal agreement and sign a contract, right? But if I was loaning you $2 to go buy a burrito and you're a friend, a longtime friend, we're probably not going to go through that same set of mechanisms. Now, we might even decide to write down that you owe me $2. We might not. But it depends on the context, right? So the use of an accounting system, a system for making visible some flow of activity, is going to be, you want to dial that, what your mechanisms are, based on the situation that you're facing. If we're facing a situation where we have a deep relationship, lots of repeat interactions, strong social ties, and it's a low value thing, well, we're probably going to want to keep the overhead low and rely on the social ties for basically making it so that if I do screw you over or you screw me over, there are repercussions, those repercussions being the social ones, that you are going to lose access to opportunities for me, opportunities with others, etc. If, on the other hand, this is a really giant transaction, we have no social relationship, etc., we may choose to use additional mechanisms like notaries or like escrow, you having to put some kind of funds in a locked account so that we are able to shift the game mechanics. You can actually think of it as, you can think of a lot of the stuff that happens in a Holochain app as being all about adjusting game mechanics. Instead of having it all happen at just a single large network layer, we enable game mechanisms to operate across all sorts of boundaries. You can decide who you want to come participate in your application. Hey, we only want people who have their real world identity, or only people who've established a certain amount of reputation, or people who have put $1,000 into a bank account, etc. You can do things like use of notaries, where notaries are participants in the system that have a much higher reputation, and as a result have significant reputation to lose, perhaps even whole businesses to lose. And so if they participate in helping someone cheat, it will cost them significantly. But these are all just mechanisms for shifting flows, right? For sculpting flows of social activity. All right, I'll leave that there for now. Julio asks, how would a DAO work on Holochain? Well, we have we did take in some of the code from the Ethereum code base and architect, based on their code, our own version of the DAO. We also did a few other pieces of code to do some benchmarking to see how much the code would resemble, how efficient our system was relative to Ethereum. However, in my experience, the idea of a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, is one where you set up some rules and those rules just operate. They're on autopilot. And you can do that in Holochain. We could set up some rules that say, hey, if I come near you, I get a point. If I get within 50 feet of you on the GPS on my phone, I get a point. And if you do something, you get a point. And so we could set up something where the humans aren't really involved. There's a bunch of automated processes flowing. But I think the more interesting thing has to do with creating mechanisms by which a community is able to steer itself, not just put a bunch of things on autopilot. Autopilot's useful. But it's like, how do I frame this? Humans are a really important part of human social systems. And if you take the humans out, you may come up with something that's very efficient in its current context. And as soon as the world shifts a little bit, you're screwed. So I'm much more excited about some similar patterns, but kind of different ones that we've been working on called sovereign accountable commons. But yeah, Robert asks, or somebody asks, based on your experience in Davos, what sort of feedback did you hear about how blockchain projects are coming along on their promises? Were there many devs there? I'm curious if the two groups would have a different opinion on this. I won't name any names, but what I heard from a lot of different groups was someone would be on stage speaking about their project. They're doing an ICO, or they just did an ICO and they're launching a thing and it's built on the blockchain and blah, blah, blah. And it all sounded great. And then when I talked to them off stage, they were willing to confess, hey, we're having a hard time getting this off the ground. Why? Well, because they're building on blockchain and blockchain is not very scalable. And unless your thing is just basically tokenization, if you're trying to do anything that's more interesting than that, then that's a problem, right? The lack of scalability, the lack of speed, the high cost gets in the way. That said, there are a lot of people in that community, in the blockchain community, that are really excited about the possibility of distributed computing systems and that want to solve those problems. So I know some of the Ethereum folks are going to be hosting a conference in May, I think, I believe in Barcelona, aimed at trying to solve scalability. And they've been working on this for a few years, ever since I first met Vitalik. He's been going, hey, the issue is scalability. How do we solve this? And they're taking some pretty big swipes at trying to solve that. I think it'll be interesting to see whether they eventually sacrifice the holy cow, which is or the sacred cow, which is the consensus model. which they've already started to do a little bit, though they don't normally frame it in that way. They go, oh, well, we'll do side chains, which is a little bit of a sacrifice of that model. I think if they take that same logic all the way down, they're going to end up at Holochain. So I'm very biased in this, obviously. But yeah, the experience that I had in Davos, speaking with lots of different blockchain projects, and there were so many organizations there doing things related to blockchain, was pretty deep frustration with the gap between the promises of blockchain and the actual ability to deliver. And so there's a lot of folks very motivated to find working solutions. And hopefully some of them find ours and they get to start building stuff that already works today. All right. We have another meeting to announce on Friday from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. GMT, which is at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. East Coast time. They're doing the first Holochain Amateur Hack Club meeting. The name may change. It's a place for less experienced programmers and those new to Holochain programming to meet and do some group and pair programming. There's a Zoom room that's available when the event starts. Hopefully somebody will add the link to where that announcement is into the chat. I think this was announced in our Mattermost, but somebody will add those links to the YouTube chat and to the Facebook chat. Next up, we have, please explain how you are offering stable value for Holo tokens. Would it be pegged or is it some other mechanism? So first thing, Holo tokens, or HOT, which is how this question was framed, we are actually not offering stable value for HOT. The Holo token is an ERC20 token. It's something that operates on the Ethereum blockchain. The ERC20 specification is pretty standard for initial coin offerings. We wanted, almost everything we're doing is novel and new, and we decided to try to keep at least one thing not totally brand new. So we're using the stock standard model for issuing a token. That ERC20 token will be tradable. It is going to be redeemable for Holo Fuel when we launch the Holo hosting ecosystem later this year, which again, I think we have been saying that's going to happen in spring. It may still happen in spring. There's a chance it could push back to early summer or so. So the Holo token is not actually designed to be value stable. It's backed by the fuel that it's going to be redeemed for. So you give us whoever's holding on to that token when we launch the network can then redeem it for an account balance, a credit account balance. When they do that, they will have Holo Fuel. Holo Fuel is designed to be value stable. There's a few mechanisms there that we're making use of to create that value stability. One, it's actually asset backed. So Holo Fuel is literally an IOU. It's a promise from our organization to the person who's holding it that we will deliver X amount of computing capacity in exchange for 1 Holo credit. Right? So if you've got 10 Holo credits, you get 10 times that much computing capacity in terms of storage, bandwidth, processing, etc. How do we price that? We're basing that on the cost of doing computing in Ethereum. So we're going to be 10,000 times cheaper than what it would take to do the same amount of computing on the Ethereum blockchain. The other mechanism that we're using for Holo Fuel to keep it not value static, but value stable, which really means we're trying to make it so that it's not jumping around with crazy volatility. We want something that's fairly stable, whether it's going up or down or neutral. We want it to be just more gradual in terms of its movements rather than massive spikes of volatility, is the fact that the currency supply is not limited. That currency is able to be issued and it's able to be redeemed. So if somebody comes to us and hands us Holo fuel and we deliver either currency or computing power, that Holo fuel gets redeemed. It is canceled out and leaves the system. When you look at the entire system, that means the amount of currency available in the system has just shrunk, right? At the same time, Holo, the organization, has the capacity to issue new IOUs, right? To issue new, hey, you want to pre-purchase some computing capacity? Great, you can buy it from us. Others will have that capacity as well. This is described in our green paper in the section on reserve accounts. But others who establish a solid reputation of being able to deliver computing capacity are going to be able to essentially issue pre-purchases of that computing capacity. That means that when demand for our currency goes up, the availability or the supply of that currency can also go up. When demand drops, people are not really wanting it anymore, they can redeem out and the supply can also drop. That enables shifts in demand to be met by shifts in supply, which has a stabilizing effect on the currency. Again, this is the formula for Holo fuel, the currency that we will be using once the network is live. That is different from Holo tokens. Right? Holo tokens are really the short-term tradable receipt that you will then redeem for Holo fuel at the launch of the network. All right. Julio says, so instead of smart contracts in Holochain, we have sovereign contracts where human agents have a say, but it's automatic by default unless it needs human interaction. I like that. Yeah, Julio, that sounds about right to me. Yeah, one of the things people often ask us about smart contracts, and Arthur Brock is fond of saying that smart contract is another way of saying dumb application. It's just a really simple application of if this, then that. And since we can handle even really complicated applications, we can handle smart contracts. But I do like the way of framing it as a sovereign contract. A little background, I'll do just a slight aside on that one. The legal system in the Western world, specifically the English court system, learned a lesson related to this a long time ago. They had set up some courts, they were enforcing laws, and they were having some not so awesome consequences. They were enforcing the laws as written, and it was leading to significant injustice, right? They were having these unintended consequences of just bad outcomes. And they realized that they needed to bring human interpretation into a cold, calculated, we wrote down these words, and so we will execute these words as written down kind of system. And they invented a whole new court system that became called the courts of equity. They called it that because it was the way of coming to equitable solutions or resolutions. And our modern jurisprudence has this wisdom baked in. We recognize that when people are writing their laws, they're not going to be able to anticipate every possible permutation of human experience that's going to happen. And in order to give ourselves a shot at getting it right once we do face some new circumstance, they have very wisely included humans in the decision-making process. We do this with judges, we do this with juries, etc. Right? So we have a bunch of processes, and they're not perfect, but the wisdom there is we're not going to get it right. We're not going to predict the future correctly every time. And so we need to give ourselves the ability to adjust based on what the experiences are that we have on an ongoing basis. From my perspective, the DAO versus sort of sovereign accountable commons type architectures really reflect that difference. The DAO type architecture is something where you're assuming that you know how all of this is going to play out. And there can be usefulness for that. But it should be happening inside of a larger context where you have the ability to go, whoa, 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 this isn't working, and make an adjustment. Julio did a follow-up. He said, for instance, today I've read a bunch about Ethereum devs complaining about losing money due to software bugs. Some of the community wants a funds recovery system, but that would require every user to upgrade, soft fork. But the main devs rejected it because they want ETH to be fully automated and want devs to ask for a donation. Interesting. Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff packed in there. There's not only the, hey, sometimes bad things happen, and how can we make that so that it's not so born in such a lopsided manner by just the random participants who happen to get hurt. But we can, it's almost an insurance mechanism, right? How can we spread this risk across the whole community so that none of us gets bankrupted entirely? We're able to absorb unfortunate shocks. But the other piece that was kind of highlighted there is that in the Ethereum blockchain and all the other existing main blockchain-based architectures, there's a huge power dynamic. There's a big difference between the average folks, the developers, the users, et cetera, and the miners. There's this privileged class that gets to make the decisions about what the future is going to look like. And everybody else is just along for the ride. And that, from our perspective, that's pretty problematic if you're trying to design a system that distributes power, but you created an architecture that actually concentrates power with some small group of elite miners. Okay, what do you think will be the first good distributed application to get traction after just token or tokenization type applications? I actually think it's going to be a game. I saw a bunch of this conversation happening recently in our online chat, and people were going, it's going to be a thing that enables us to sense, all of the outcomes and repercussions of our actions. And that sounds wonderful, and I really want those things to exist in the world in the very near future. It's part of what drove me into all of this work was this sort of, hey, let's really upgrade our sense-making capacity. And I don't think that's going to be the first application. I think the first application is going to be something fairly simple that solves a problem that isn't currently getting solved. It may actually just be Holo, right? The thing that we've done the crowdfunding for, and we're doing the ICO. That's probably the first killer app because it'll be our mother app, because it's going to be used by so many other applications, and because it makes use of such a more efficient currency architecture that it may get picked up and used for all kinds of things that we aren't even anticipating it being used for yet. So I think it's going to be something like Holo, or literally, a game, a game that bridges across games, perhaps. The sort of flexibility that the Holochain architecture gives you in terms of creating an ecosystem where it's not all one game, it's a bunch of things that can interoperate, and things can happen over here that then get changed and shared in a different community, and that gets changed and shared somewhere else. I think we'll see some really interesting things along those lines. But in my experience, the stuff that wins tends to be pretty simple, and it tends to be it solves a need, and psychological needs are needs, right? So people getting to go, wow, that was fun, that matters. I don't know that we'll see Pokemon Go on Holochain just yet, but I'd be excited to see that, or some more interesting, more dynamic version of that. Yeah, a Pokemon Go where people are making up their own rules as they go, and others are deciding to opt into their game. That could be cool. But it may be just a card game thing. I have no idea. It could be Scrabble. How do you summarize Holo then as a category of app? What type of app is it? I think of Holo as a service application. It has a couple of parts. One, it fosters hosting. It literally enables existing Holochain applications to build a bridge to anybody using a web browser. And two, it's got a currency design, a crypto accounting system for tracking and basically doing payments for the activities that people do, for the hosting that people contribute. So what kind of app is it? I see it as a service application. I see it as a pretty core piece of architecture that makes any regular Holochain app more useful because it enables them to speak to a much bigger community. And it also has this mechanism that it's using with the crypto accounting system that because that's so fast, designed to be stable, affordable, etc., I think that might end up becoming used pretty widely for smaller transactions. I actually don't anticipate seeing Holo used for $10 million transfers of funds. It doesn't feel like the architecture is optimized for that. But 50 cents, $1, and $10, or buying a bicycle or an ice cream, yeah, Holo could be used for a bunch of flows of financial activity that go well beyond the hosting services that we're actually designing it to be able to support. And we have designed it to be capable of supporting those other kinds of activity, but that's not our intention, right? That's not the sole focus. Nonetheless, if, as we're expecting it to, it proves so much better than the other stuff, the other options on the field, whether those are cryptocurrencies, credit cards, cash, right? The other ways of doing payment processing, then it'll get adopted pretty widely, and that may end up being the big app. What else do we have here? So I'm managing the funds of a few Arab clients for an investor. Can we expect an increase in the value of Holo tokens like other coins for holding for a long term? I can't make any promises about the performance of Holo tokens. That would be illegal. However, we have designed our currency and our currency offering to be generative of value. We're pricing our currency at 1/10,000th the cost of Ether for same computing capacity. However, we expect that our user community is going to actually be able to deliver those services for significantly cheaper, meaning 1/100,000th or 1/1,000,000th the cost of Ether. What that means is, if we're selling something at this price and then you're able to get a whole lot more, there's a decent chance that the value is going to rise. If other people find Holo to be a useful tool for hosting, for a medium of exchange, etc., then the value would likely rise. I can't give you investment advice, but I can tell you to go take a look at our currency design, to go look at our green paper, and to make a call for yourself. Do you think that this is something that's going to be solid? We have had some investors come to us recently who they were intending to invest in Holo. The blockchain-based cryptocurrency markets have not fared well over the last month or so, as most of you know. And so they had gotten sort of a little less excited about risking funds because they just lost half their money. And so they went, well, we're not sure if we're going to be able to invest. And then something that we had said to them before sort of rang a bell, and they called back and said, hey, that whole value stable thing, can you tell us a little more about that? So a lot of folks are investing in things to try to find a rocket, but many of the architectures of the tokens that are out there are designed to be artificially scarce, not have any real value backing them, and are some of, not all of them, but many of them are basically just Ponzi schemes, right? It goes up because other people think it's going to be worth a lot, and it keeps going up and it keeps going up until people go, maybe this isn't worth so much, and all of a sudden it collapses. Holo is designed differently, so we expect that it will not have that same shape. We're trying to design it to be something that goes up and then finds its natural point of sort of the price at which hosting stays profitable, but is not overly profitable, that's pulling additional actors into the system. And that'll basically level off. Who knows, what the things are that'll steer this stuff up or down. It could be that some country at some point decides they want to use Holo as their actual national currency. I hope not. but we're trying to make it so that speculation is not what steers the system. There's only so much that we can do in terms of sculpting what others do with regard to investing in or gambling on, or et cetera, our system. But we've done our best to try to make it so that the tail doesn't wag the dog. All right. Nun says, what would it take to have Holochain replace the internet itself? So instead of connecting to an ISP, you'd connect to your neighbors who also use Holochain. Do you see that happening? Great question. So this dives into mesh networking. We're big fans of mesh networking. We have some friends that are doing mesh networking systems. We're interested in it. And we are hopeful that Holochain can be, down the line, and maybe Holo, or the Holo architecture, can be a useful tool for the crypto accounting in paid peer-to-peer networking. So Holo is really designed to handle compute and storage. It's really architected for handling those things at present. Peer-to-peer compute and storage work. Peer-to-peer bandwidth, hey, I'm going to pass your packet along, is a similar but different pattern that we're interested in supporting down the line. We will probably, if we do that work, it would likely be with others. We would partner up with other folks that are doing peer-to-peer mesh networks and work with them to create a currency system that enables compensation when you have people take hops. That said, I'm actually interested in something that doesn't just have dollar style or Holo fuel style compensation as the mechanism for recognizing contributions. I'm interested personally in seeing systems where I can say, hey, my phone, you're welcome to hop from my phone to the network, and you can ride for free if you're family. You can ride for cheap if you're a member of one of these communities in good standing, and you can ride full price, if you're a stranger. So I'd like to see some diversity of the currencies or signals that people are able to make use of in exercising discretion about who they're going to be providing bandwidth services to. Julio says, what steps can be or are implemented in Holochain to prevent corruption? I'm not exactly sure what Julio means by corruption there. There's a couple. Data corruption is one form of corruption. People committing fraud is another form of corruption. Data corruption, everything is signed and hashed, and it's validated by peers in the network. So data corruption should get caught fairly quickly, either recognized that, hey, this data is invalid, or, hey, this isn't the data that you're saying it is. So that kind of thing, I think we've got some mechanisms at the at the tech level that handle those sorts of corruption. Fraud, there are an infinite number of different forms of fraud that people have tried to commit in the world and will try to commit. We've come up with some really good lightweight building blocks for making it so that people can detect fraud, or that they at least have evidence when something has happened, that they've got the signed proof that you tried to do X. Now, I'm under no illusions that we have figured out all the ways that people are going to try to trick systems. Different applications are going to design themselves with different patterns. Somebody's going to design an app. It's going to have a vulnerability. Someone's going to exploit that. They're going to go shoot, and they're going to try to fix that vulnerability. Others will hopefully also learn from that and adopt that solution or a different solution. So that, and the goal here is not for us to anticipate in advance all the ways that people can be bad. That would be wonderful, but we're not omniscient. Unlike, just like everybody else, we're not able to predict all of the future. The goal is for us to be able to learn, for people to have experiences, for others for people to try new forms of fraud or attack or whatever, others to learn from that, be able to come up with mechanisms for fixing or preventing those forms of attack, and then enabling that sort of pattern to spread. So it's really about adapting and immune system responses. Julio wanted to make another point. Holo is designed for abundance instead of scarcity. Awesome. Thanks, Julio. Nun says, specifically, is there a way to make a distributed DNS work together with the current DNS? Work together with the current DNS. Well, one of the ways that you can think about Holo is as a bridge between the current DNS system, DNS being domain name system. It's actually a centralized registry of domain names. This is why there's only one google.com or yelp.com or whatever. So you type in that thing and it routes to a specific IP address or set of IP addresses. And you end up interacting with those web servers. Holo is a bridge between that system and the peer-to-peer naming systems or namespaces of Holochain applications. So it is that bridge between distributed DNS and the existing centralized DNS. And I'll frame it this way. It's the bridge between distributed DNSs because each of those is their own sort of separate space. Interesting. So the OG Foundation said, Allodium is looking to use Holo as our national currency or an app built on Holo. Awesome. That's great. That's really funny. Some of our team members are going, woot. I don't know if that's a woot or not. I'm actually not all that in favor of it would be great to see adoption. Yay. And I'm interested in a multiplicity of currencies. I'm interested in lots of different signals that are used and useful for particular contexts, right? Yeah, we can go into more of that about that next time. Okay, I'm going to wrap things up. Just a couple of reminders before we go. Holo chats this week. The topic is distributed applications. Learn more at medium.com/tag/holochats. We've got upcoming meetups and hackathons. There's a meetup on next Tuesday, February 13th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Impact Hub Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area. We also have some upcoming hackathons, a Sao Paulo hackathon at the end of March, a Copenhagen hackathon, March 22nd through 25th. If you haven't already done so, join our chat community, chat.holochain.org. Learn more about us at holo.host. And if you have any questions, feel free to ping us in chat or just hit us up next time on Facebook Live Q&A. Thanks so much. Again, I'm Matthew Schutte with Holochain and Holo. Have a good one.